You know, when you get to be as old as I am, you have earned the privilege, and it is a privilege, to both think and believe and say that common sense sometimes trumps common wisdom. So I think that some of my remarks are going to be based on running after-school programs since 1973, if you can believe that, which was 8 years after I started teaching, so you can do the math and figure all that out. Oh, I hate microphones. Okay. So providing kids with after-school professionals who are most like them is absolutely critical. I mean, after-school staff who easily and fully and really understand these kids is absolutely pivotal to development. And I think we agree with that. I don't think that's a big place of departure. But here's where we depart. I believe that there are current practices and proposals and policies from our colleagues in the field that absolutely will undermine the capacities of after-school programs to develop the kinds of relationships and to develop the kinds of connections and to develop the kinds of activities that are going on that really are going to promote learning among kids with the greatest needs and the fewest resources. And let me tell you why. I think that after school is one of the few spaces left in this country at this time where we have the independence and the flexibility and the freedom to support and nurture these relationships. And I think that our ability to learn, if you've ever been a teacher, and I'm sure many people in this room have been, and God knows once you're a teacher, you're always a teacher, that our ability to learn has our deepest roots in our relationships, and that's both personal and cognitive. So what matters first and foremost to me is being able to train staff to look at what their lived experience has been and is, connect that to the lived experience of the kids in a program, however those kids are, and helping them to use the metaphors that connect in the brain, whether it's hip-hop or calculus, that most resonate with these kids. Because the people from the communities, and I don't think Mark would disagree, most clearly have the metaphors and the syntax and the words that are going to make those connections in the brain. Because here's what happens when they don't. I've seen some very, very highly educated, highly credentialed staff working in after-school programs, using abstractions with young children who can't in any possible way, whether they're English language learners or not, make the connections from those abstractions. Let me talk about the youngest child, for example, kindergarten. I've heard very well-educated staff say words like, use your walking feet, use your inside voice. What does that mean? And you know what happens when you can't connect to what something means? You start to feel not very smart. And when you start to feel not very smart at a young age, it's real easy to tune out. And it's real easy to isolate yourself. And learning withers. And my concern for staff development is so much about using what staff that you already have, already know, what's in their brains, what's in their minds, and connecting it to what kids already know, what's in their brains, what's in their minds. And I often tell a story. I have two sons, they're grown and kids of their own, 6'7" and 6'5", and they're basketball players. And there's a basketball great, Red Auerbach, who once told me when they were very small, because he knew they'd grow, they had big feet, and he said, I can teach how to dribble, how to shoot, how to pass, but I can't teach tall. And I took that and I translate that to staff development and after school. I can teach ages and stages. We can have staff development for room arrangement and use of materials and all kinds of pedagogical stuff, but we can't teach close to home, physically, socially, emotionally. The next thing to me that we haven't talked about is who's training staff to look at economically poor kids of color as more than deficiencies that need to be corrected so they can behave more like middle-class students. Who's doing that? You know, in LA's Best, we have an alternative interpretation to low test scores, because I got the lowest testing scored kids in the city. And our interpretation is, you know what, those tests don't reflect much about what these kids already know. Let me give you a specific example, even academically. Teachers tell us, and we got lots of them, that kids in LA's Best compared to kids not in LA's Best have far greater vocabulary. It's obvious. I mean, they're sitting there using words in a social context. That doesn't show up on reading tests. They're not testing as proficient, but they're pretty smart. So what does all this mean for staff development and professional development? And I happen to think all of the folks who work with us are highly professionals. Are highly professional, and I don't believe that you can identify in our programs who's a credentialed teacher, who's not. What I think is most important in teeing up these kids for success is the development that energizes and motivates staff to be able to help kids make patterns and to connect what's real to them to a larger society. Look, we all know that what we pay attention to is profoundly influenced by our memory. I don't have the trust in some outside training, and I loved that article in the Times yesterday, to connect to your kids, to my kids, in the context in which they are.